Hollywood has always loved the word evil, but the truth is, evil in Hollywood doesn't look like villains in black suits or screaming divas throwing chairs across a set. It looks quieter than that, colder, more respectable. Sometimes it smiles at you between takes. Sometimes it wins Oscars. Sometimes it's protected by the studio system itself. He survived the people Hollywood was afraid to say no to. Before we go on, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Frances Bavier. The quiet cruelty of emotional distance. Frances Bavier was a symbol of safety to the American people. She was the epitome of warmth. Mayberry's emotional core, Aunt B, was a woman whose soft demeanor inspired millions to believe in small-town generosity and unwavering support. However, the reality was much more complex and unnerving to Ron Howard, the young actor who worked next to her every day. Frances Bavier didn't make noise. She didn't make fun of others. She didn't get angry or make demands. In Hollywood, she instead engaged in a much more potent technique, emotional withholding. Bavier appeared to be stuck on the set of The Andy Griffith Show. She felt that she had been diminished, trapped inside a sitcom that she considered beneath her artistic identity, despite having classical training and being really serious about her work. That anger didn't blow up in the face, it became calcified, and it was felt by everyone in her vicinity. Ron Howard has frequently characterized the set as pleasant and lighthearted, with Don Knotts improvising, Andy Griffith laughing in between takes, and the crew unwinding. But something changed every time Frances Bavier walked into the room. The chuckles subsided. The tension increased. The reason she withdrew was not because she demanded it. This absence was perplexing for a young performer. Professionalism is not interpreted by children. They make sense of presence. And when the cameras stopped rolling, Bavier made no offer. Respect, not love, was what she desired. Not familiarity, but distance. Not warmth, but authority. And she believed that separation was necessary for seriousness. Bavier felt that being overly amiable would weaken her artistic integrity. She saw Aunt B as a compromise rather than a gift. Naturally, the irony is that, while her theatrical aspirations subtly slipped into the background, the role cemented her in American culture. She was hardened by her internal struggle. Her bitterness grew as the show's popularity increased. She grew more and more reclusive, eating by herself, avoiding social situations, and hardly interacting with the cast outside of what was strictly necessary. Later, Ron Howard remarked that this was the first time he had ever encountered the harsh reality of Hollywood. The person who grins at you on television might not be interested in getting to know you in real life. Cruelty in the traditional sense did not exist. Don't yell. No humiliation in public. Only coldness. And coldness can be disastrous, particularly for a child. Early on, Howard saw that fame or skill do not equate to emotional giving. The most agonizing people are sometimes unsatisfied with the life they feel they deserve, rather than being angry. Bavier grew more distant throughout the years. She rejected reunions, grew estranged from the actors, and ultimately left Hollywood completely. She chose seclusion over reconciliation and took her bitterness with her. Decades later, Howard never mentioned her in a hateful way, just melancholy. Ron Howard learned from Frances Bavier that unresolved identity cannot be healed by achievement. Instead of liberating people, that fame might freeze them. And after enough time, that emotional detachment turns into a kind of covert brutality. His first survival lesson was that having family on screen does not equate to having humanity off screen. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Chapter 2. Yul Brynner. Fear as authority in the Golden Age. Ron Howard was first exposed to emotional coldness by Frances Bavier, but Yul Brynner exposed him to something even more frightening: fear as a leader. Brynner didn't act like a celebrity. He acted like a king. He was a constant presence on set. He didn't speak out. He refrained from public debate. He didn't have to. He was already crowned by the industry. The head was shaved, the dominant stance, the purposeful quiet. Brynner recognized a fundamental aspect of Hollywood's Golden Age structure. Myth, not teamwork, was the source of authority. He was shielded by studios. He was respected by the producers. Around him, crews adapted. When Ron Howard was younger, he saw grown-ups in Brynner's orbit shrink. Everyone was aware of the hierarchy, not because Brynner directly threatened them. The entire production sensed Brynner's discontent. Later on, Howard referred to it as the air leaving the room. That ambiance was one of capitulation rather than creative strain. Lighting was fixed. It wasn't mentioned. Blocking was accepted rather than negotiated. Errors were punished with silence rather than being investigated. The organizing principle turned out to be fear. This was not a coincidence. According to Brynner, authority was maintained via distance. He kept himself unapproachable, alien, and untouchable by assiduously creating mystery. He believed that familiarity diminished power, and that idea worked in the studio structure of the Golden Age. But there was a price for it. Around Brynner, Howard saw that individuals ceased to share ideas, how spontaneity vanished, how execution became the focus of creativity. Although the work was completed, nobody felt comfortable taking chances. This style of leadership was foreign to a young Ron Howard, who was brought up by a father who emphasized planning, compassion, and cooperation. Brynner governed by being there, not by taking part, and that made an impression. When Howard took over as director years later, Brynner's spirit accompanied him. Howard recalled the sensation of fear and the effects it had on individuals each time he walked onto a set. Brynner had total control over his territory, but he was the only one in charge when the lights went out. Chapter 3. Shelley Long. When intelligence becomes obstruction. Ron Howard was more than simply a former child star by the early 1980s. Actor on one side and director on the other, he found himself at a crossroads. On the night shift set in 1982, Howard faced a different kind of challenge, cerebral dominance rather than ego or fear. Shelley Long brought a whole new approach to acting to that set. Speed didn't appeal to her. Efficiency didn't interest her. Process piqued her curiosity. Long was raised in the Second City tradition of Chicago, which valued psychological justification, analysis, and deconstruction. There was a purpose for each line. Each response had a past. Nothing happened by accident. Howard was initially impressed by it. However, appreciation soon gave way to tension. A production that relied on momentum, Night Shift was a fast-paced comedy that was filmed under strict time constraints. Everything was slowed down by Long's approach. Scenes that ought to have lasted a few minutes turned into protracted arguments. Question after question. Reasons were followed by justifications. It wasn't conceit. It wasn't brutality. It was perfectionism without regard for the consequences. Later on, Howard saw that Shelley Long ruled with intelligence rather than tantrums. Furthermore, intelligence may be just as destructive as ego if left unchecked. The crew waited. Other actors became unrhythmic. The intensity of the set broke. As Long's career took off, this friction grew. When Cheers debuted in September 1982, she became one of the most talked about actresses on television practically overnight. Confidence followed achievement, and influence followed confidence. Now Howard had to deal with a celebrity who questioned direction itself, not simply lines. He discovered that a director safeguards flow rather than only directing performances. This is a crucial leadership lesson. Efficiency was the key to surviving in the system Howard had grown up in. Long had been raised in a system where the objective was exploration. Although neither strategy was incorrect, they clashed when combined. Howard came out of Night Shift a different person. He acquired the skill of listening without giving up control. How to satisfy curiosity without allowing it to impede output. Ron Howard learned from Shelley Long that intelligence should be controlled rather than rewarded. Sometimes that leadership entails saying, "We move on." In his transition from actor to director, it was a subtle but significant shift. Chapter 4. Russell Crowe. Fire that demands control. Russell Crowe lit the set on fire if Shelley Long's queries caused it to lag. Crowe was a natural by the time Ron Howard cast him in A Beautiful Mind in 2000. He had a tumultuous public persona and an Oscar-level renown after the May 2000 release of Gladiator. Crowe did not show up to work with. He came to pose a challenge. Great art, in Crowe's opinion, could only be produced under duress. He questioned everything on an emotional level rather than an analytical one. Scenes were pushed till they broke, and then pushed some more. Howard, who was renowned for his composure and organization, was suddenly in charge of a man who loved conflict. Crowe's demand that A Beautiful Mind be recorded chronologically was the crux of their most well-known argument. It was a logistical nightmare for a production of that size. Sets have to stay upright. Timetables become inflexible. Expenses went up. At first, Howard resisted. Crowe was not going to give up. He made the straightforward claim that John Nash's psychological decline could not be accomplished out of order. He felt that the persona needed to be lived rather than created through editing. In the end, Howard consented, a choice that had a significant psychic cost but also paid off creatively. It was a very intense set. There was a deep silence. Long and frequently angry debates were common. Later, Howard referred to Crowe's inquiries as good, tough questions, which is Hollywood jargon for endurance tests. This dynamic recurred during the 2004-2005 production of Cinderella Man, when Crowe's physical metamorphosis and emotional commitment once more drove the production to its breaking point. The movies were successful. In 2002, A Beautiful Mind took home 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Howard. But fatigue lay underlying the praise. Howard discovered that unbridled desire absorbs all those engaged. The goal of such leadership is to construct walls that are strong enough to prevent the spread of the fire, not to put it out. Ron Howard discovered the hardest reality of all from Russell Crowe. Sometimes being a good leader requires resisting greatness itself. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Chapter 5. Tom Sizemore, When Talent Collapses from the Inside. Tom Sizemore was all over the place by the late 1990s. He was regarded as one of the most intense dramatic performers of his generation, not merely a working actor. He was trusted with authoritative duties by directors. Studios entrusted him with large sums of money. His presence was significant. However, Ron Howard saw something quite different when he met Sizemore. It wasn't ego. It wasn't perfectionism. It was absent. Howard has frequently referred to Sizemore as one of the most agonizing periods of his professional life, not due to confrontation, but rather to the unpredictable nature of the situation. On a set, addiction doesn't make a big show of itself. It manifests subtly as unanswered calls, scenes that are delayed, and ongoing uncertainty. The question became, will he show up today? Every morning? Will he be able to function? Will manufacturing cease? That uncertainty is poison to a director. In a place where hundreds of people rely on constancy, Howard held a strong belief in the sacredness of the set. Everything becomes unstable when addiction joins that environment. Morale among the crew plummets. Timetables collapse. Budgets deteriorate. The reaction from Hollywood only made it worse. Studios at the time frequently condoned damaging conduct, covered the handlers. Schedules were modified. They made excuses. The damage was accepted as long as the cameras were rolling. Howard was caught between duty and empathy. He recognized Sizemore's lack of malice. He was ill. However, Howard also realized something much harsher. A movie set is not a facility for rehabilitation. Chapter 6. Henry Winkler, The Quiet Violence of Popularity. Ron Howard was most damaged by this disagreement since there was no antagonist. There was no cruelty in Henry Winkler. He wasn't cunning. He didn't crave power. He was just more well-liked. Ron Howard's character Richie Cunningham served as the foundation for Happy Days in the middle of the 1970s. The moral core was him. The audience stand-in, the show's core. Then an unforeseen event occurred. Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli became a cultural icon. Winkler's character dominated fan interest, merchandise sales, and ratings by 1975. Jackets made of leather, catchphrases, covers of magazines. The acclaim was followed by the industry. Howard's posture also subtly changed. He was no longer consulted by executives. Storylines veered off course. Without any explanation, respect vanished. Howard didn't feel envious. He was moved. Network executives even suggested rebranding the show to focus on Fonzie at one time, which Howard considered to be quite embarrassing. Not because Winkler wasn't deserving of success, but rather because Howard was being ignored. This was not a betrayal of the self. The brutality was institutional. Momentum, not loyalty, is what Hollywood prizes. This story is noteworthy because of Howard's handling of it. He refrained from snapping. He didn't sabotage. He didn't destroy relationships. Early on, he realized that staying would make him less important in his own profession. Thus, he made a choice that frightened him. He turned to leave. Many believed that Howard's decision to leave Happy Days at the height of its glory and pursue directing was dangerous, if not stupid. However, it was also when he took back command. He and Winkler remained friends. He managed to maintain his dignity, and his prospects grew. Ron Howard learned from Henry Winkler that success can cause unintentional harm. Power is subtly reshaped by that popularity, and that sometimes changing course before Hollywood transforms you is the only way to survive. Ron Howard came to a conclusion after looking back over 60 years that very few people in Hollywood ever express in public. The majority of evil in this sector isn't intentional. It is activated. Made possible by celebrity. Fear made it possible. Made possible by mechanisms that incentivize outcomes without requiring accountability. Francis Bavier demonstrated to him the power of emotional distancing. He was shown as terror as authority by Yul Brynner. He was shown intelligence as control by Shelley Long. He was shown limitless passion by Crowe. Unassisted, Tom Sizemore demonstrated his collapse. He was shown success by Henry Winkler without malice. Every lesson had an impact. His leadership improved with each scar. Hollywood was never dominated by Ron Howard. It was never threatened by him. He didn't ever shout it. He survived it. That might be the most unusual accomplishment in a field that devours its own myths. Because winning accolades isn't always the best kind of success. It involves leaving with your integrity intact.